The current global scramble for crude oil is a physical impossibility masquerading as policy. We are watching terminal addicts fighting over scraps, battling endlessly over the distribution of the narcotic of dwindling fossil fuels. What politicians and the media call grand geopolitical strategy is nothing more than a fatal logic error in our broken linear capitalism operating system. We are running a software architecture of extraction, consumption, and disposal on a piece of hardware, the Earth. A piece of hardware that is running out of memory.
Wait, hang on. Are you actually listening to yourself right now? You cannot reduce the incredibly dangerous complexities of modern diplomacy and, well, warfare and national sovereignty to a mere software glitch. I mean, these nations are making highly complex, realistic, strategic decisions to protect their citizens, defend their borders, and maintain global stability in a...
Your moral framing is data noise.
Excuse me. Data noise? People are dying.
It is an emotional output that has zero bearing on the thermodynamic reality of our situation. I will demonstrate precisely how this so-called realism you champion is entirely disconnected from the physical costs of survival. Let us establish the baseline physical reality of our international situation. We are watching gentlemen arguing over who has the best manners to steal the last oxygen tank in a poison gas-filled room.
That is an absurdly reductive...
You have Russia connecting their hose to the tank, claiming that tank belongs to my friend. You have China inhaling deeply while suggesting, let's all breathe peacefully little by little. And you have the United States pulling a gun, pulling a gun saying, I will manage it for the safety of this room.
This reductionism is frankly offensive to the realities on the ground. You're completely ignoring the moral and legal dimensions of these actions. I mean, Russia's actions are a genuine violation of international law. We are watching a sovereign nation being systematically dismantled. When people look at that, they rightly scream, what a terrible invasion. You cannot equate an unprovoked aggressor with the United States and its allies who are, fundamentally trying to protect democratic institutions and secure the physical supply chains that literally keep the modern world functioning. There is a clear distinction between an arsonist and a fire department.
The distinction exists only in your obsolete moral accounting. In physical reality, Russia is merely roasting marshmallows on that heat of a burning neighboring house.
Roasting marshmallows? That's a horrific way to describe a war.
You speak of international law, but to the Russian state apparatus, high oil prices generated by geopolitical tension are the best spice. It is legal doping to fund their operations and cover their massive physical deficits. They condemn aggression diplomatically in certain theaters, while their economy physically feeds on the resulting friction. War artificially restricts the supply of the fossil fuel narcotic, driving up the price of the exact asset they possess. That is not an ideology. That is an algorithm executing a survival strategy based on resource extraction.
But there are real-world consequences to that extraction. What about the global economic stability that other nations are trying to uphold? Are you going to tell me that a nation like China, which relies heavily on global trade, is operating on the exact same logic? Because they are actively calling for de-escalation?
China is holding a buffet discount ticket. They tell the fighting patrons in the restaurant, everyone, please eat calmly while they are quietly collecting scraps from the kitchen. They are absorbing massive quantities of cheap, heavily sanctioned Iranian and Russian oil. By publicly advocating for peace while mathematically exploiting the conflict to secure below-market energy, they maintain their thermodynamic advantage in global manufacturing. Their only definition of a sovereignty violation is a disruption to that low-cost energy supply line. They do not care about the fire. They care about how cheaply they can buy the ashes.
You are treating human lives and the defense of democratic institutions as if they are mere variables in a math problem. What about the alliances built on shared values? I mean, what about Ukraine? By your cold logic, how can you possibly criticize Ukraine for aligning with Western democracies and nations like Israel? Iran has done nothing to Ukraine, yet Ukraine rightly treats Iran as a hostile actor. Has Ukraine forgot the past of screaming, "It's an invasion," when Russian tanks cross their own borders? How can they turn around and politically support the destruction of infrastructure elsewhere in the world under the banner of Western security? If you want to talk about logic errors, look at that double standard. It proves this is about complex human alliances, not just thermodynamics.
Your insistence on analyzing this through the lens of shared values and hypocrisy is exactly why the linear capitalism model is blind to its own collapse. Let us look at the physical reality, which overrides your emotional confusion. Iran has delivered a very tangible physical answer to Ukraine: the Shahed suicide drones.
Exactly. Which is why they have a political stance.
These are not political statements. They are physical packages of mass and high-energy explosives designed to permanently erase energy grids and water treatment plants. Therefore, Ukraine's geopolitical posture has absolutely nothing to do with global democratic solidarity or double standards. It is a purely mechanical calculation of survival cost reduction. They are executing a cashback of approval desire.
A cashback of what?
A cashback of approval desire. Ukraine requires a continuous, massive injection of external physical resources, weapons, capital, refined energy, all to delay their own systemic collapse. To secure this constant flow of resources, they must publicly validate the geopolitical actions of their primary resource suppliers. They applaud the destruction caused by their suppliers elsewhere, essentially looking at the rubble in the Middle East and saying, "Your way of destroying is correct." It is the ultimate discount sale of morality to secure physical hardware. Ukraine is functioning as a victim who was attacked by a robber screaming help, police, but upon seeing that same police officer kick down someone else's door on the way home, applauds and says, "As expected, your legs and back are strong."
That is an incredibly cynical, just horrific characterization of a nation fighting for its literal existence. Of course they need weapons. It is mutual self-defense in a hostile world. If Russia is receiving drones from Iran to destroy civilian infrastructure, Ukraine has an absolute moral and strategic imperative to receive advanced interceptors and artillery from NATO. It is the fundamental balance of power. You cannot expect a nation to fight off an imperialist aggressor with bare hands. This isn't some abstract theory about energy packages. This is about preventing authoritarian regimes from redrawing the map of the world by force. If they don't fight back, there is no nation left to govern.
You are simply describing the completion of a death supply chain.
It's self-defense.
You are fixated on the brand names of the munitions and the flags painted on their sides, rather than their thermodynamic function. We're observing two fighting neighbors, where one receives a cheap bat from the black market, and the other receives the latest stun gun from a wealthy relative. Both sides are entirely dependent on external inputs to maintain their violence, and both are completely ignoring the mathematical reality, the irreversible loss of physical resources, and the permanent degradation of their local environment's repair efficiency.
What does environmental repair efficiency even mean when tanks are rolling down your streets? You're talking about soil samples while people are dying. If they lose the war, the environment belongs to the invader.
Environmental repair efficiency is the biosphere's measurable capacity to filter heavy metals, absorb carbon, and sustain agricultural yields. Every missile strike, regardless of whether it is fired for your concept of justice or imperialism, scatters chemical toxins and zeroes out the Earth's capacity to regenerate. This creates a physical debt that is never logged on the GDP spreadsheets of the linear capitalism OS. When a city is bombed and then rebuilt, your system registers that as economic growth. It is a fatal calculation. The only entity surviving this equation is the city real estate agent.
The real estate agent, what are you talking about? Who is the real estate agent in a war zone?
The arms industry, the defense contractors, the financial speculators, they are standing on the sidelines, taking meticulous notes on the destruction of public infrastructure so they can sell rebuilding contracts later. Your beloved balance of power is nothing more than a mechanism designed to justify the extraction of resources solely to process them into high-energy bodies meant to destroy life and infrastructure. This maximizes global survival costs for everyone while generating short-term financial capital for a localized few.
Well, look, if you are going to condemn the active participants as functioning within this death supply chain, then surely you must acknowledge the diplomatic restraint shown by others in the international community. If the active combatants are flawed, then look at the cautious distance maintained by the non-combatant superpowers. Look at the strategic patience of China or the reluctance of NATO to engage in direct, boots-on-the-ground conflict with nuclear powers. Surely this represents a mature, adult approach to international relations. They are utilizing diplomacy, economic sanctions, and deterrence to avoid a third world war. That is not a glitch in the operating system. That is the system working exactly as intended to contain the fire.
That is not maturity. That is predatory calculation masking severe systemic bankruptcy. You are misinterpreting physical exhaustion as diplomatic wisdom. Russia's so-called restraint in secondary theaters is just them checking if the sparks will come this way. They are perfectly content to wait for Western physical and economic resources to be sucked into a black hole of perpetual conflict. And China is merely an accountant taking notes calmly at the edge of a bar brawl, counting the broken glasses to see who can pay the tab later. They do not love peace. They are simply executing a resource acquisition simulation that mathematically requires avoiding direct thermodynamic friction while their competitors burn through their strategic reserves.
You're stripping away all human agency and moral restraint. They are choosing not to escalate because they understand the catastrophic human toll it would take. They are the adults in the room.
They are the older brother, smiling while watching two kids fist fight over the last cookie. Society looks at this dynamic and says, older brother is calm and great. But the reality of his algorithm is entirely predatory. He is waiting for the exact moment of maximum physical exhaustion. His real plan is confiscating the dropped cookie and all their toys after they fall asleep exhausted from fighting. But here is the ultimate physical irony that the linear capitalism operating system blinds him to. When he finally steps in to claim his prize, the cookie is expired and moldy.
Moldy? Because the economy is damaged? Economies recover. Europe recovered after World War II. We rebuild.
Because the physical resources are depleted, the supply chains are fractured beyond repair, and the biosphere is irrecoverably toxic. You cannot rebuild a 21st century economy on an energy return on investment that has dropped below 3-to-1. 20 years ago, burning 1 barrel of oil yielded 30 barrels of energy. Today, we are burning 1 barrel just to extract 3 from deep water wells and tar sands. It is a mathematical death spiral. The moldy cookie is a biosphere that can no longer support the agricultural and industrial requirements of 8 billion humans.
Okay, but even if I accept this grim view of resource depletion, you are entirely dismissing NATO, the most successful defensive alliance in modern human history. Their restraint isn't predatory. It is what keeps the nuclear threshold from being crossed. They are upholding the very foundation of international law.
NATO's reluctance is not a moral triumph. It is the scream of an aging, bankrupt system. They are entirely dependent on the continuous injection of cheap fossil fuels to maintain their so-called sophisticated economies. Their military stockpiles are hollowed out from decades of prioritizing financialization over physical production. They offshored their industrial base to the very nations they now identify as geopolitical adversaries. They are residents of a luxury nursing home closing the curtains on a yard brawl, complaining getting involved in such barbaric things will delay tea time.
A luxury nursing home? I mean, are you kidding me? They command the most advanced militaries on the planet.
They possess the decaying currency of past hegemony, but they do not possess the domestic industrial capacity to forge artillery shells at the rate of thermodynamic consumption required by modern conflict. They are willfully ignoring the fact that the brawlers outside their window are the very people who physically supply the energy, the rare earth metals, and the agricultural fertilizer required to keep the nursing home's lights on and its pantries full. They do not have the physical resources to intervene. They only have printing presses for fiat currency, which cannot intercept a hypersonic glide vehicle or power a manufacturing plant when the supply chains freeze.
But ultimately, nations must win. I mean, you can analyze the physics and the thermodynamics and the supply chains all you want, but at the end of the day, survival and victory are all that matter in the human experience. If your nation is erased from the map, if your people are subjugated, your theories about environmental repair efficiency do not matter. Nations must secure their borders, protect their people, and triumph over those who seek to destroy them. That is the reality of human history, and no amount of cold logic changes the human will to survive and achieve victory.
In the current operating system, victory no longer exists. The very definition of victory in linear capitalism is a mathematical illusion. You believe these nations are fighting over a treasure mountain. They are not. They are punching each other in a garbage dump looking for spare parts. The physical resources expended to secure the crude oil and the territory now far exceed the actual energy return of the assets themselves. You are operating on an iceberg of fossil fuels that is rapidly melting away, yet you desperately insist on treating it like solid ground. What you call the global stage is nothing more than a dance party on a sinking ship. Russia is stealing chips while playing the piano. China is collecting scraps from the kitchen to ensure they starve last. The United States fires blanks into the air shouting, "I am the captain." NATO complains that their dress gets wet as the water rises around their ankles. And Ukraine is sitting on the deck pretending to row the boat. The current linear operating system is hurtling toward a mathematically guaranteed forced shutdown. You cannot negotiate with thermodynamics. You cannot sanction entropy. A complete transition to circular capitalism is not a moral choice. It is the only rational investment for survival. It is an operating system where raw material extraction is mathematically capped by the biosphere's regeneration rate, where the foundational metric is not GDP but environmental repair efficiency, the strict elimination of single-use energy expenditures. In a circular system, you do not win by destroying your neighbor's infrastructure to secure a dwindling narcotic. You survive by achieving a closed-loop, zero-waste physical economy. Until that transition is forced upon us by complete systemic failure, you will continue to mistake the spasms of a dying architecture for grand strategy.